time for change. Change to everything and absolutely anything. But with that being said, the most obvious question could be is, how's this all to begin? And yet with it starting as such, it's obviously being answered as such. So of course this is all to be a free exploration into a matter or issue concerning that of life. And that this is also to be a continued free exploration, which is also freely exploring the kingdom of heaven, as with creatively producing the kingdom of heaven within this physical state, whereby then directing this towards the following biblical scripture from the last gospel of Thomas, which comes to state, Jesus said to his disciples, compare me to something and tell me what I am like. Simon and Peter said to him, you are like an angel. Matthew said to him, you are like a wise philosopher. Thomas said to him, teacher, my mouth is utterly unable to say what you are like. Jesus said, I am not your teacher, because you have drunk and you have become intoxicated from the bubbly spring that I have tended. Now, of course, this is being directed towards the Amanita muscaria mushroom being consumed by Jesus, and due to Jesus existing within such a state of health and within such a state of emotional positivity, he has come to, how could you say, filter this Amanita muscaria mushroom, which of course is a psychedelic magic mushroom, and has come to produce this psychedelic urine that he has come to promote to disciples for them to enter into a state of an induced meditation to explore the one singular state of emotional clarity, so that they are able to sensationally acknowledge the one singular state of emotional truth that has come to exist within this one singular state of emotional clarity, for them to emotionally know how to creatively produce a truthful, emotional, meaningful state within this physical state, whereby this truthful, emotional, meaningful state is of course to be the existing state of paradise. Now, with that being said, if it were then to reflect back onto a previous biblical scripture from the last gospel of Thomas, which comes to state, Jesus said, congratulations to the one who came into being before coming into being. Of course, we have come to spiritually exist before we have come to physically exist. If you become my disciples and pay attention to my sayings, these stones will serve you. Now, of course, this is easily able to be directed towards knowledge or matter coming to serve us. For there are 5 trees in paradise for you. They do not change, summer or winter, and their leaves do not fall. Whoever knows them will not taste death. Now, to not taste death, of course, it's within the one singular state of the emotional imagination that we are to, how could you say, eternally live, thus infinitely live. Thus we are to live forever within the one singular state of the emotional imagination, thus to live within forever within the heavenly state. Now, if we were to explore the induced state of meditation and directing this towards 5 plants, of course the tree of life is easily to be acknowledged as that of cannabis. Then it's to be that of morning glory, which is to be associated with LSA and LSD being that of the synthetic version. Then there is Salvia divinorum, which is that of divine sage. Of course, ayahuasca, and then of course ibogaine. Now, these 5 plants are easily able to be associated with 5 chakras, right? 5 churches, the 5 virtues of life. Yet, if we were to associate, how could you say, all 7 chakras and all 7 virtues with natural psychedelics, it's then to associate cannabis, ayahuasca, ibogaine, salvia divinorum, morning glory, the cacti, and obviously that of the mushroom. Now, if it has also been stated within the biblical scripture of Nehemiah 9 verse 15, which comes to state, you provided bread from heaven for them to eat. You brought forth water from a rock for them to drink, and you told them to enter in order to possess the land which you swore to give them. Again, you told them to enter into the one singular state of the emotional imagination, to sensationally acknowledge a one singular state of emotional truth, to then emotionally know how to creatively produce a truthful, emotional, meaningful state as the existing state of paradise. To possess the land which you swore to give them. Of course, this existing state of paradise is the land which has been sworn to be to us, right? Now, with this then being stated, of course, it's easier to acknowledge that these natural psychedelics are, of course, obviously sacred, right? But, in the idea of it being said that there is spiritual use and that there is recreational use, right? We have to acknowledge that in exploring recreational use, right, what are we creating? What are we recreating? We are recreating ourselves and we are recreating the existing state of the environment. Thus, the recreational use is then easily able to be associated or connected to that of spiritual use as well. If it's to acknowledge that we are to sensationally acknowledge a one singular state of emotional truth, within this one singular state of emotional clarity, to then emotionally know how to creatively produce a truthful, emotional, meaningful state as the existing state of paradise within this physical state. Then, of course, this is obviously to be then sacred. These plants and these natural psychedelics are to be sacred. But then if we were to direct this towards the following biblical scripture from John 8 verse 31 to 32, which comes to state, so Jesus said, those who believe in I'm going to say that again. So Jesus said to those who believed in him, if you obey my teaching, you are really my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I'm going to say that again. If you obey my teaching, you are really my disciples. Now, the teachings are easily able to be directed towards the 7 virtues of life, whereby if we are to physically exist within the physical state of the present, it's then coming to associate the crown chakra with the state of humility, the third eye with the state of kindness, the throat with the state of forgiveness, the heart with the state of diligence and passion, the solar plexus with the state of charity, the sacral with the associated with the state of temperance and patience, and then of course the root to be associated with the state of chastity. Now, of course, to practice this within this physical state, within the physical present state of the now, is easily able to be described as a physical state of meditation. And yet these teachings are also easily able to be directed towards the 7 notions of life, which of course are to be associated or connected to the 7 virtues of life, whereby humility is to be associated with the notion of learning and teaching. The state of kindness is to be associated with the notion of support and creativity. The state of forgiveness is to be associated with the notion of healing. The state of diligence and passion is to be associated with the notion of encouragement. The state of charity is to be associated with the notion of assisting. The state of temperance and patience is to be associated with the notion of coordination. The state of chastity is to be associated with the notion of survival, thus stability, the notion of stability. Thus, these are the teachings. And then it comes to say, you will know the truth. Of course, the truth has come to exist within the 7 virtues of life and within the 7 notions of life, and the truth will set you free. Now, to, how could you say, physically exist within the physical present state of the now, and to practice these 7 virtues of life within the physical present state of the now, of course, is a physical state of meditation. But again, we are then able to, how could you say, and free ourselves within this physical state, right? Now, it's also through the 7 notions of life that we are also able to free ourselves. But in saying that, and you will know the truth, of course, and the truth will set you free. This then is being directed towards Bob Marley's words, which came to say, none but ourselves can free our mind. Emancipate yourself from slavery, from mental slavery, for none but ourselves can free our mind. To free yourself from mental slavery, for none but ourselves can free our minds. Now, an induced state of meditation is, of course, an induced state of meditation. But of course, there's physical meditation through the 7 virtues of life and through the 7 notions of life. And then there's also, of course, natural meditation, right? Now, to explore, to free yourself from mental slavery, right? I came to create something quickly, right? If it's to acknowledge, right, just to briefly acknowledge, right, that the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness is to be associated with the vertical state, right? Whereby this vertical state is then to be associated with the past, present, and future, right? Now, associating the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness with the vertical state is then to be associating the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness with the existing state of a square, right? But upon looking at the existing state of the square, right, it's easily to acknowledge that, of course, I could say, distinguish that this is north right now, right, in the place that I'm holding with my finger right there. There we go. So that's north right now, right? But of course there's no clear indication, so this north is basically within a questionable state. So there's north, right? So there's north for now, right? But let's say now I go wandering along, and there, of course, with no indication, right? And all of a sudden, that becomes north, right? And then, of course, now this is all within a distinguishing state and within a questionable state, okay? And now I go wandering again, and all of a sudden I come along, and now I come to distinguish that that is north. And of course, this is constantly able to go on and on and on and on. So it's to recognize that without there being a clear indication that this is north, is to equally realize and recognize that any of the 4 states of the square are to exist as any direction, right? So this, of course, is easily a confused state, right? So in this, of course, the distinguishing state is then easily able to be associated with the state of confusion, right? The egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness is then also easily able to be associated or connected to the state of confusion. Now, of course, we have come to physically exist within this physical state, and of course the distinguishing state, which of course is the 6th sense, that is to be associated with the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness, but in associating the distinguishing state with the 6th sense, it's then coming to associate us with that of the tree of knowledge, right? So, existing within this physical state, and then using the distinguishing state, now of course the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness is also to be associated or connected to the existing state of the brain. Thus then clearly indicating that the distinguishing state has then also come to exist within the existing state of the brain. Now we have come to physically exist, and through using the distinguishing state we have come to distinguish physical descriptions, right? So then in this, it's then also creating a security of a physical description. So and that being stated, I'm just going to write it down here quickly. Security of physical description, right? Description, right? Okay, so there's physical description, right? This is everything that we have come to associate. I don't know if you guys can see it there. But anyways, it's written right over there, right? I don't know if you guys can see it, but whatever. But it's written right over there, right? It's at the top. It's right at the top. This is our main focus within this physical state, is to physically describe everything within this physical state, right? Then, using the distinguishing state, okay, is then also coming to acknowledge that we have also come to sensationally attract an infinite amount of questionable knowledge unto our state of being, right? But of course the distinguishing state is then to be associated or connected to the state of a skull, right? If we were to imagine that, right? That it has come to weigh all this knowledge, right? And in weighing this knowledge, it has also then come to create a security of what is positive, security of positivity, of positive, and then it has also come to create the security of what's negative, right? Negative, right? Negative, right? Now, of course, holding up the piece of paper right now, right? I've come to write a security of physical description, a security of what has been distinguished as positive, and a security of what has been distinguished as negative, right? But it's to acknowledge, right, we are then to also exist within the center state of this square, right? The one singular state of the emotional consciousness, right, is to exist within this center state of the square, right? But of course the emotional consciousness is to be associated not only with that of the emotional experience, but it is also to be associated with that of emotional belief, right? So in this, the distinguishing state, as mentioned, has then come to, let me just straighten this out quickly, right? It's come to attract all this infinite amount of questionable knowledge, right, unto our state of being, right? Like, I mean, we are constantly not attracting it. I mean, we have to equally realize and recognize that the attracting state is again the one singular state of the emotional consciousness. So again, it's coming to learn an infinite amount of questionable knowledge, right? And it is piling it onto the skull, right? But of course the distinguishing state is to be associated or connected to pre-existing knowledge, right? And this pre-existing knowledge has also been distinguished from pre-existing knowledge as well. And that again, this pre-existing knowledge has again been distinguished from pre-existing knowledge. So again, the distinguishing state is constantly existing within the past. So the constant past is within the constant state of question. It's not existing within the state of the present now. It is constantly using the past information to distinguish what is emotional positivity and emotional negativity, and through this it has then come to weigh this, right? Now in weighing this, right, of course it has also then come to create the emotional security, right? Emotional security, right? In this process of weighing, right, it has then come to create this emotional security. Like, this is the final stage of when this knowledge will be like released onto the existing state of the emotional consciousness, right? This will be the final stage. So it's constantly weighing this, and then obviously it's eventually coming to filter this. But of course, this is all within a state of question, right? And in this being stated, it's also then to acknowledge that everything that it has come to distinguish as negativity, thus junk, it has come to reject as junk, trash, right? So this is then to equally realize and recognize that again we have come to, how could you say, filter a distinguished state of emotional half-truth, if you want to call it that. But again, this is a questionable state of emotional half-truth, right, that it is being filtered, right? And in this, it is then coming to influence the one singular state of the emotional consciousness, right, to, how could you say, then creatively produce an emotional experience from this questionable state of half-truth, if you want to call it that, or half-positivity, if you want to call it that even, right? So again, it's constantly weighing that. But in this, creating security, right? Of course, security, it's protection. It's protecting us from whatever's out there, right? The unknown, right? So again, it's like within a constant state of fear of the unknown. This is why security is being created, right? It's fearing the unknown, right? So as it's learning this infinite amount of questionable knowledge and piling it on, it's constantly fearing and all of this. So it's in this, right? In this also being stated, it's then to acknowledge, again, I'm just going to draw the way there, again, it's just being way there. I don't know if you guys can see it there, but in this, it's to acknowledge that this state of security has also come to create a state of imprisonment, right? Whereby it's imprisoning the one singular state of the emotional consciousness to freely emotionally experience within this physical state. And it is also, if we are to spiritually exist before we are to physically exist, is then to acknowledge that this distinguishing state is then also imprisoning the state of the emotional spirit. Thus, it's imprisoning our state of the natural, true, emotional self within this physical state, right? Now, I'm just going to make sure I got all of this down now. Okay, so then, of course, turning the page here, right? I'm going to turn the page here. Now, of course, we have come to be associated, the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness is to be associated with the state of a square, right? But as we come to stand, right, and an individual comes to hold out their arms, right, the mere fact is that, again, north, easily to be noticed as the head, right? South, always to be noticed as your feet, right? Now the weirdest thing is that the west is of course your one arm, and then of course east is of course your other arm, right? Now as you're holding them there, you are being held as a state of a diamond, basically, looking at it, right? So now you come to exist within a state of a diamond, right? But here's where it gets truly fascinating. N is equals N, obviously to be associated with the word of neutral, right? Okay, and then W is obviously to be associated with the word of wandering, right? Right? And then, of course, south is obviously to be associated with the word of sin, so sinful, right? And then E is obviously to be associated with the word of emotion, right? Now, holding it up again like this, right? Holding it up again like this. There's neutral, there's the sinful state, right? And then there's the emotional, and then there's, how could you say, the wandering state, W for the wandering state, west, and then there's east, right? Now, in this being explored, then it's also to acknowledge that between west and east, there's of course a line coming to exist, right? And this line, that the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness is to be associated with, thus the vertical line is then to be associated with the state of the past, and then within the center of this line is going to be the present, obviously, and then by east is obviously going to be the future, right? So in this being explored, it's then to acknowledge that the wandering state is then to be associated with the past, and if it's to be associated with the wandering state, to wonder is to question. To question the past is to be lost in the past, thus a state of confusion, right? So again, the past is to be associated with the wandering state, right? And that the emotion is direction, so that the future is a directive state, but we are to exist within the state of the present, right? But this is where it truly gets interesting. Now, if we were to fold it, now of course, neutral is obviously also to be described as a state of oneness, right? And it is to acknowledge that within the heavenly state, that there is an existing state of oneness. Thus, there is an existing state of unification. Thus, within the one singular state of the emotional imagination, there is an existing state of one love, right? So again, the emotional imagination is to be within a state of oneness, right? But being seated like this, right? And it's also coming to transcend. So it's coming to, how could you say, enter into a heavenly state through a natural state of meditation, right? So in this, it would be then to acknowledge, right, that if we were to then reflect upon the process of the natural state of meditation. Now, of course, to explore this within the infinite amount of knowledge that there is to be discovered about the process of natural meditation. I mean, there's such an infinite amount of knowledge to be discovered out there, and that to just think about it all, right? Just to think about all this infinite amount of questionable knowledge. I mean, the mere fact is that you could even get lost. I mean, that this knowledge could come out to be so complex, right? So complex. But the mere fact is, if it's to humble yourself down to the state of a child, right, to explore this and to explain this as the existing state of a child, within the humble state of a child, right? Of course, as we are to close our eyes, right, the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness is obviously to be associated with this physical state, right? Now, as we are to close our eyes, right, this is where the magic begins, right? Because as we are to close our eyes, of course, we are to enter into a state of darkness, right? A state of nothingness, right? Of course, this is easily able to be consumed by so much thought if it is to be, how could you say, allowing yourself to be consumed by so much thought, right? I mean, there's so much going on in our lives, so it's actually allowing ourselves to be imprisoned and enslaved by knowledge, by thought, right? Now, the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness is, of course, to be associated with the questionable state, and it's the distinguishing state which is also to be associated with the questionable state as well. And yet, it is the distinguishing state which is our sinful state. It's the state of imprisonment. It's the state of encapturement, right? So it is that of the sinful state. Now, in a state of meditation, it's to acknowledge that, of course, an individual is to close their eyes, thus entering into a state of darkness, thus turning themselves off from this physical state, right? And through turning themselves off from this physical state, it's, of course, reflecting on the state of count, whereby it's from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7 to 6. But as you come to inhale, you are breathing from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 3, 2, 1, and then releasing as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then again 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 3, 2, 1, and then releasing yourself as 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's through this process, right, that it's to acknowledge that, again, our minds, right, the brain, of course, is to act as a filter system, right? So it's basically allowing all this questionable knowledge to pile up, to stack up, and then, of course, the number of 10. I mean, knowledge exists within a state of vibration, right? And the existing state of vibration is easily able to be associated with the existing state of an atom. Now, the existing state of an atom is also to be associated with that of a number, right? So it's acknowledging that all these numbers are piling up, right? All these numbers are basically piling up, from letters to anything. I mean, basically all these numbers are piling up, right, in the existing state of the brain. Now, the highest state of the number, 10, the number of 10 is easily able to be associated with the highest state of knowledge concerning that atom, if you had to think about it. I mean, if we had to reflect upon the existing state of just one atom, right? 10 is to be associated with an increase of knowledge, right? And now 1 is to be associated with an increase of emotion, right? So again, it's 10, 9, 7, 6, 3, 2, 1. So it's through this process that we are entering into the one singular state of the emotional self, right? Our natural state of emotional self, the natural state of the emotional spirit, through the this physical state of meditation through 10, 9, 7, 6, 3, 2, 1. Again, 1, 1, right? And then as we come to exhale, right? As we come through as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's again, we are releasing this knowledge, right? It may seem like if we're releasing this knowledge, but we're actually not releasing this knowledge. We're actually not actually cleansing ourselves from thought, right? If it's to acknowledge that all this information is still to be gathered up, right? It's still to be gathered up, right? So we're not actually releasing ourselves from the state of thought or from the state of knowledge, but what we are releasing ourselves from is the sinful state, thus the distinguishing state that has constantly come to distinguish all this infinite amount of questionable knowledge. And it's through releasing ourselves from this distinguishing state, thus the sinful state, that we are then to, how could you say, enter into our state of a natural state of emotional self, thus the natural state of the emotional spirit, to then sensationally explore the one singular state of the emotional imagination. Now, in this being stated, it's then to acknowledge that through this breathing process, right, it's also to increase the vibrational energy that is to be associated with the one singular state of the emotional spirit, and that this vibrational energy is, of course, obviously the vibrational energy of love, right? So it's through this breathing process that we are also increasing the vibrational energy of emotional love, right? To then, how could you say, filter. I mean, it's literally taking, like, if you had to think about it like a sieve, like a giant sieve with all this infinite amount of questionable knowledge, like, stacked up. And then it's like basically taking your hand with the power of love, but not actually just saying that the power of love is like so strong, right? And then it doesn't even need a hand above it. Of course, we will come to physically like sieve it through with our hand. But just imagine that this love is so strong that it comes to attract all this infinite amount of questionable knowledge, right, into the one singular state of emotional clarity, thus coming to change this questionable knowledge into known knowledge, to creatively produce the one singular state of emotional clarity. Thus, this clearly indicating that the one singular state of the emotional clarity, thus the one singular state of the emotional imagination, is within a complete state of truth. So, right? So, with an induced state of meditation, reflecting back onto the psychedelics, right, it's only to acknowledge that the psychedelics, right, are to reconnect us with the one singular state of the emotional spirit. And it's through reconnecting us with the one singular state of the emotional spirit, right, that we are then to, how could you say, that this love within our state of the one singular state of the emotional consciousness is then to increase itself, right? And it's through increasing itself that it's also then coming to sensationally attracting this infinite amount of questionable knowledge into the one singular state of the emotional clarity. And then, of course, we have come to physically explore this physical state with the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness, thus coming to explore it with two eyes, and then to explore the one singular state of the emotional imagination within regards to even that of natural meditation or through induced meditation. It's to explore it within the physical state of the mind. Thus, it's then to acknowledge that the state of nothingness is to become the state of everything, right? Now, to just briefly explore this, right? If it's to then, how could you say, if it came to state this through these words, right? I'm going to just find it again here quickly. Just finding it again here quickly. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Again, the recreational use of these hallucinogenics. Again, the hallucinogenic experience, the visionary experience, the dream-like state experience. What we have come to explore in the imaginative state is all to be explored within the physical state of the mind, right? Now, through then sensationally acknowledging a one singular state of emotional truth within this one singular state of emotional clarity. Of course, this one singular state of emotional clarity is even able to change us through even just being able to explore and experience such a state of in-depth truth, right? Now, the mere fact is coming out of this, of course, is easily able to change us. Now, reflecting back onto the physical state of a square, this change, how is it to change us? Again, it's going to release us from the distinguishing state. And through releasing us from the distinguishing state, I mean, this is easily able to be directed towards the idea of ego death. The idea of ego death is basically, how could you say, killing the distinguishing state, killing the sinful state, to become the natural state of the emotional self within this physical state. Now, this physical change, of course, we aren't going to grow wings and all of this type of thing, but the mere fact is that the change comes to happen within the mind, that the change comes to happen within the one singular state of the emotional consciousness. It's bringing us closer to the one singular state of the emotional consciousness, and if it is bringing us closer to the one singular state of the emotional consciousness, it is then also bringing us closer to the divine source of the one singular state of the emotional consciousness. Now, of course, this change, this emotional change, again, the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness, as with the distinguishing state, is to be associated with the physical state of a square, right? But, looking at the corners of the physical state of a square, this is where it gets interesting. It's easily to acknowledge that the distinguishing state is easily able to be associated with the energy of fear or with the energy of hate, right? But is it to be associated with the energy of fear? Fear in itself is an explorative experience, thus then clearly indicating that the distinguishing state is then to be associated with the energy of fear. Of course, there's the positive and there's the negative, and of course, love, hate, right? So of course, this emotional change, looking at the four corners of the square, right? It's to acknowledge that, of course, there's a break between each one, right? And this break is a state of limitation that has been created from the distinguishing state, right? It has created this, right? I mean, even if we had to think about this as north, south, east, west, north, south, east, west is all within a state of limitation due to the distinguishing state, right? Now, reflecting upon the four corners of the square, this emotional change is easily able to be noticed, right? The four corners of each square has come to exist within a 90-degree state, thus the number of 9, easily able to be associated or connected to the number of 9. Well, of course, the number of 9, but the fingerprint of God, recognizing that everything has come to originate from the 10th spiritual dimensional realm, thus the divine state of I am, right? Thus, through the 9th spiritual dimensional realm, everything has come to exist. From the heavenly states to this physical state, everything has come to exist. Now, if I were to add each one up, of course it's going to create a 360 circumference, right? But of course the distinguishing state has come to create a state of limitation, right? Now, the fascinating thing is when this happens, that through acknowledging, I hope these scissors cut. These scissors are not going to cut for me. Anyways, let's just call it like this. If I had to just say, grab this plate here quickly, empty it out here quickly, and just do this quickly. And let's see if I can just do this quickly. Just tear it off. I mean, this is all irrelevant at the end. Well, it is irrelevant information that it transfers. But let's just say now, I'm going to just do it like here. I'm going to just do it here. Okay. So it's to acknowledge that the square is to be associated with the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness, and such as the distinguishing state is to be associated with the state of the square. But reflecting upon the state of circle, which I'm trying to create here very quickly, it is to acknowledge that the physical state of a circle, there, I think I've created seemingly a circle, right? It is there. Haha, found scissors. Okay, so let me just draw this briefly. Excuse this, but it is a free exploration. So just be patient and just be cooperative and just be a bit more understanding. Here we go. Okay, so I've messed all of this up, and now I've even, there we go. Now, just to cut this out quickly. I should have had this all prepared. I thought like I cut the green with those scissors, so I would think yeah, this is would work, but anyway. Okay. Okay, so through coming to an emotional change. An emotional change. Haha, the state of a square, and the circle, the state of a circle. Through this emotional change, of course, the emotional consciousness is going to exist within the center state, right? But it's through this emotional change that we have come to release ourselves from the sinful state of the distinguishing state. And it's through this state that we have also come to associate ourselves more with the one singular state of the emotional consciousness. And if it is to associate ourselves more with the one singular state of the emotional consciousness, is then to acknowledge that then it's to be associated or connected more with the known sensational vibrational energy of emotional love. Now, it could be described that this is going to create a state of limitation, that even the distinguishing state would come, this state of awareness, right, would come to create a state of limitation, right, through the state of a circle, right. However, if it's to associate ourselves with the one singular state of the emotional spirit, right, it's then coming to associate ourselves with that of the intuitive state, whereby the intuitive state is of course going to, how could you say, measure all this infinite amount of knowledge, right, that it is to sensationally learn and attract unto a state of being. And it's through measuring, it's not even weighing, right. This is the whole mystical thing about it all, is that it's not even weighing this knowledge, right? It's allowing all this knowledge to come into the one singular state of the emotional consciousness. It's allowing it. It's freely exploring this knowledge without any state of limitation. Anything comes and anything goes. That's the whole thing about it. Anything comes and anything goes. So it's again not within an imprisonment state. So anything that it has come to measure to be more in a mattered state, more within a questionable state, more within a deceitful state. I mean, this a state of a deceit is to be within a state of question. Thus, a state of question is then easily able to be associated with the state of questionable knowledge, and that questionable knowledge is also easily able to be associated with the state of matter. So it's recognizing that it's measuring the emotion and it's measuring the matter that has come to exist within this knowledge, and that if there is more matter within this knowledge, it's to acknowledge that this knowledge is obviously pollution unto the soul, insults, mockery, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this is all pollution unto the soul, and that wisdom, emotional truth, insight, emotional truth that has been released through the one singular state of the emotional spirit within this physical state, insight, wisdom, that is emotional truth, is to be within a higher vibrational energy of emotional love compared to that of matter, right? So again, it's acknowledging that it's to freely allow, embrace, and freely release, thus creating the existing state of a cell. I mean, the existing state of a cell, again, is within a constant free exploration within this physical state. So, with that being said, I've gone a bit over here and there and everywhere, but with that being said, may the lovers keep on loving and the haters keep on hating, and this will be continued. Namaste.